let's break down the sniper scopes that go on assault rifles, LMGs, and marksman rifles. In this video, I'll be talking about the stats of high zoom optics, telling you why you shouldn't use specific ones, and give you better alternatives. So let's begin with breaking down the functions of the sniper scope. Compared to when you're not ADSing or just hip firing, you have about 5.24 times zoom. If you are comparing it to a standard iron sight ADS, it is 3.79 times zoom. If you've noticed though, it doesn't exactly zoom as much as the outside of the scope as the inside of the scope. This is because it actually only zooms in your FOV by 3.28 times instead of the full 3.79 times. Variable zoom scopes are only available on assault rifles, not LMGs, so they have a low zoom and a high zoom setting. The low zoom setting is pretty low, and it's comparable to a VLK sight, and the high zoom is pretty high, and it is higher than the standard AR sniper scope zoom. I have to note though that if you're using the AR sniper scope or even the high setting on the variable zoom, you still won't have the same zoom as a normal sniper rifle scope. Even though the actual zoom doesn't match the in-game description, if the in-game description says it has over 4 times zoom, that means it will have glint, including on the low zoom setting of the variable zoom optic. If you want to compare these details, I will leave this here for a few seconds. So now that we've gone over the functions and the basic stats of the sniper scopes, let's talk about why you shouldn't use them. The first reason is the cost to ADS time. On assault rifles, it can have an impact of anywhere between 80 and 100 milliseconds, but on LMGs, it's from 100 to 150. And on marksman rifles, it's somewhere between 50 and 60 milliseconds. The variable zoom is only available on assault rifles and marksman rifles. Most assault rifles have about a 100 millisecond impact, and on marksman rifles, it's between 50 and 60. So it seems that the best way to use these sniper scopes would be on marksman rifles, then on assault rifles, and lastly on LMGs. And since you're playing a more long-range game, you're probably thinking, well, ADS time doesn't matter that much to me. But I will have to disagree. If you want to use your full auto weapons, or even semi-auto weapons to the fullest potential, you're going to need to be getting your shots off before your enemy can react. If you and your enemy have the same ADS time, the person that has a faster TTK will win, especially if your enemy happens to have a weapon that can hit you once in the head and you're done. That is an advantage that you don't want them to have. But let's move on to the next point. The next reason is the amount of zoom you actually get. Whenever you use any of the sniper optics, yes, it will make your target appear much larger, but it will also restrict you from using this weapon at closer ranges. So if you're ambushed, you probably will have to start hip firing. Here is a comparison of a VLK sight, a variable zoom optic, and a 4x flip hybrid. As you can see, the VLK and the variable zoom low have the same zoom, but they both have significantly less zoom than the 4x flip. And now when we compare the 4x flip to the AR sniper scope and the variable zoom high, the AR sniper scope only gets 0.2 times more zoom than the 4x flip. But the variable zoom high gets a whole 1.10 more zoom than the 4x flip. If you really want that extra zoom, the AR sniper scope really isn't worth running over the 4x flip, especially since the sniper scope doesn't have the ability to switch to a lower zoom. So right now, the variable zoom scope seems to be a pretty good option for long-range builds, especially since it seems so close to the VLK, which is the standard scope for long-range weapons. However, part of the reason that makes the VLK so great is that you get that 2x zoom in a small objective. The diameter of the variable zoom scope is 1.67 times bigger than the VLK's. While that does mean that it is easier for you to scan around and find your enemy, the VLK lets you have more peripheral vision. And not just that, if you get shot, you do flinch. But with the VLK, you will flinch much less than with the variable zoom scope. So if two equally skilled opponents are fighting at full auto at a medium range, then the VLK does have the upper hand. Which leads us to our next topic, FOV Zoom. When it comes to long-range optics in Warzone, what you want is the most zoom with the least impact on your FOV zoom. I've talked about the best optics in a previous video that are like this, so if you want to check them out, the link is in the description. But showing this slide here, we can see how much a higher zoom impacts your FOV. The biggest benefit to having a better FOV is being able to see more of your peripheral vision. It also lets you get into engagements in a lot closer distances. Like I mentioned before, a higher FOV means that you get less flinch. It also means you have less belt recoil, so it's easier to control. But we'll talk more on that later. So as you can see, having a sniper level zoom really reduces your FOV. So having a high zoom and a low FOV means that your versatility is removed. You're only able to fit a very specific role. But how well can you actually fit it? This brings us to the next point, recoil. When using sniper scopes, your recoil is actually increased, which is the opposite of the more popular zoom optics like the VOK, which actually reduce your recoil. Here are the recoil patterns of the VOK, sniper scope, and variable zoom scope. The sniper scope has a little bit more horizontal recoil, while the variable zoom scope has a lot more horizontal and vertical. If we count pixels and compare the VOK to the variable zoom, vertically, that's about a 10% difference, but horizontally, that's almost 35%. And vertical recoil is a lot easier to control than horizontal recoil. At extremely long ranges, where these weapons are supposed to be used, the bouncing from side to side can easily make you miss your target, and there's nothing you can do about that. So while the zoom may make you feel like you would be better at longer ranges, its actual recoil may prevent you from doing just that. So in order to actually use sniper scopes at longer ranges, you will have to tap fire and burst fire, which severely reduces your TTK. But your actual recoil isn't the only recoil being affected. Your visual recoil is heavily affected as well. The amount of zoom that your scope actually zooms in and the amount that your FOV is zoomed in does actually make you feel like you get more or less recoil. This makes it extremely difficult to track your targets, especially at longer ranges. But it also makes you think that you can't really control your recoil, even though you are. And just like your actual recoil, in order to combat this, you're gonna have to burst fire or tap fire, which means your TTK is gonna be much longer. And even on a semi-auto weapon, you will be impacted just the same. You're better off using a lower zoom scope if you plan on maintaining your high fire rate. And now for the last point, glint. I tend to look out for glint. If I see it, that means that there's probably someone out there that can potentially one-shot me. And while you think that may be in your favor because you may be scaring other players, usually what follows from me is I ping the target and I switch to my long-range weapon. I'm not a sniper myself, but I like long-range weapons and I'm pretty good at counter-sniping. I use high fire rate weapons which make the sniper flinch and potentially get off target completely. Although on my team there usually is a sniper, which means they have the potential to one-shot that sniper when they're distracted with me. Or vice versa, if they're distracted with my sniper, I can lay down fire knowing exactly where the enemy is. And that's the power of glint. It signals everyone to exactly where you are, and that makes you an extremely easy target. A huge mistake that many snipers make is they hold down their sights for way too long. You really should only be ADSing when you know you can take your shot. And notice how I haven't really brought up quickscopers yet, because quickscopers do that. They scope in and scope out immediately. They're more aggressive and they're not going to be having glint for very long. And even then, it's not uncommon to put non-sniper or glint optics on your quickscoping weapons, because if you're playing more aggressive, you don't need that much zoom. Lately, I've been seeing a lot of Kar 98 users use the Cronin Pro optic. This has 0.2 less zoom than the standard assault rifle scope, but it has no glint. If they're positioned really well, you really have no chance to fight back because there will be no glint for them to give themselves away. You just get shot, you register it, and then they shoot you again and you're downed. And if you remember how the Cold War snipers were before, nobody used any optics with glint. Everyone used 3x and 4x zoom optics because they had pretty good zoom and they had no glint. That means you can make extremely long range shots with no glint. Stealth is a huge part of Warzone, and we try to get as much of it as we can. So don't lose a major advantage just because you need to see your target a little bit better. Because remember, even if you can see them better, the chances that you're actually going to be able to hit them are much lower. So if you want more zoom, just go for any of the other non-glint optics. Even the 4x hybrid is pretty good on some weapons. You're getting almost as much zoom, and it's still better than having glint and getting way more recoil. I mean, the best optic in the game for recoil reduction is technically the canted hybrid, and because it's a hybrid, that means you can actually use it up close as well. But for maximum versatility, the VLK is the best sight for a reason. Its ADS time is pretty good, and it has the right balance of FOV zoom to actual zoom. So stop using the sniper scopes on weapons that cannot get one-shot kills. The slightly bigger and more zoomed in picture you get from using these scopes is not worth the cost from missing your shots due to the increased visual and actual recoil, or the target you paint on yourself to every enemy. So that's my breakdown on using sniper scopes on non-sniper weapons. Do you agree with me? If not, let me know why. And if there's any build, weapon, or part of the game you want me to break down, let me know and you may see it on the next Community Wednesday. But that's the video. If you enjoyed it or it's helped you in any way, let me know by leaving a like. If you got any questions or comments, leave them down in the comment section down below. And if you want to make sure that you never miss another video, be sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching.